My name's Tim Lake. I'm a writer. I run a literary night in Brighton. This is Jonathan Newman. He's an academic. He's an anthropologist in Sussex. We both like observing people. We just see people in a slightly different way. So we can start.
We are. I realise a lot of people, I think we're one of the only people talking about cannabis at this conference, but just for those who are interested, there is someone on the bike tour who's taking some acid, and if you guess who it is, you can have a prize. You can either have some cannabis-inspired condoms or some bike tour rolling papers. So you have a choice at the end, but you've got to get the question right. Right, let's fire away.
Let's fire away. Okay. Guys, ready? Okay.
Excuse me.
Thank you very much. Okay, so the peaks of the Sierra de Cuenca rise up ahead. Pine-covered green against the blue sky, where not even one white fluffy cloud sits. It's approaching midday and the sun is already hot on the skin. Perspiration beading as the cyclists crouch low. Backs hunched, fingers gripping the handlebars. Their breathing is getting heavier as the climb begins to bite. Eyes flicking from the skyline to the road. By the end of today, they will have cycled 130 kilometres on mountain roads. The seed bank entrepreneur looking to do good. The publisher seeking to legitimise the plant's healing qualities. Grow shop entrepreneurs, coffee shop crews, organisers of cannabis social clubs. They're all participants on the 2013 Medical Cannabis Bike Tour. It's not a race, it's a collective feat, a shared feeling, a common goal. Sport in the name of cannabis, cannabis-enhanced sport. Some smoke as they ride, some smoke when they finish, some don't smoke at all. But they all believe. They believe in changing perceptions of sport. Why should a stoner be a couch potato? Perceptions of health. Why should the medicinal qualities of the cannabis plant be ignored? The ride looks like any other charity bike ride at the outset. It's only as it progresses that the differences begin to show. It's an organised tour with no official organisation. A lack of structure or guidelines or pre-prepared route markers. Spliffs are smoked to warm down, warm up, and cannabis is used to treat sporting ailments. Yet the tangent the tour takes is symbolic of the cause it represents, and that cause is the bond that sees this group of amateur sportsmen and women, aged from 17 to 69, complete 350 kilometres in 3 days. As our group climb mountains, deal with injuries, get lost, find their way again, the riders reach deep into themselves. They work together, the stronger riders supporting the weaker, pushing themselves to the limit, true grit and determination in this shared sporting experience.
So, where do we fit into this? Somewhere in the middle. To study the use of cannabis to enhance the pleasure of sport, we signed up as volunteers. In the support vehicles, we dispensed essential supplies to fuel the cyclists on their daily feats of endurance. Nuts, bananas, water, energy drinks, and the occasional nugget of white widow. Analytically, we're going to look at 3 interrelated issues of legitimisation that became apparent during our study of the bike ride. The legitimation of cannabis in sport, the legitimation of cannabis for medical uses, and the legitimisation of the European cannabis business sector, estimated at €1 billion turnover per annum, not including the actual sale of cannabis or its derivatives. According to the World Anti-Doping Authority, the privately run institution that regulates drug use in the most amateur and professional sport, or much amateur and most professional sport, doping is fundamentally contrary to the spirit of sport. So was this cycle ride the antithesis of legitimate sports participation? Was the consumption of cannabis on the cycle ride and the public use of sport to promote the use of cannabis violations of the ethical and social codes designed to enhance the sporting experience? Was cannabis even doping? The cycle ride draws out many problems within the current debate about whether or not cannabis should be on WADA's prohibited list. The contravention of the spirit of sport is one of 3 criteria that WADA employ to determine if any substance or method should be prohibited. The other 2 are the enhancement of performance, e.g. increased stamina, and potential health risks, e.g. heart problems. To be banned, a substance or method must fulfill 2 out of the 3 criteria. We focus in this paper primarily on the spirit of sport, which is defined as follows. We've got ethics, fair play and honesty, health, excellence in performance, character and education, fun and joy, teamwork, dedication, commitment, respect for rules and laws, respect for the self and other participants, courage, community, solidarity. As was clear during our study of the bike ride, these values were present, and we found no evidence that the use of cannabis contravened them. On the contrary, it had been a facilitating factor in many cases. What is at stake here is as much about these values being attributed to cannabis use as to sport. The spirit of sport is about ethical and societal values. If cannabis use augments such values, then the bike ride reframes the use of psychoactive drugs as a positive contribution towards building a better liberal society. Such a formulation is, however, in contrast to the hegemonic imagery and meanings of cannabis use aligned to non-constructive deviancy and indolence. Yet cannabis is one of the most detected substances in WADA urine screening programs, suggesting that what we saw on the bike ride represents part of a more widespread sporting lifestyle.
Before the bike ride, our research had revealed an extensive list of amateur sporting activities in which cannabis is used. I don't know if anybody here does sport and does cannabis with it, but we asked the question, why combine cannabis and sport? It gives a different perspective, says one of the cyclists, a 30-year-old coffee shop employee, smiling as he tugs on a joint underneath the shade of a pine tree. If I'm stoned, I see sport in a different way. I'm not so much in a hurry, not trying so hard, and for this I do better. Says another of the cyclists, I smoke, I do different sports, soccer, kung fu, cycling, sometimes stoned, sometimes not, but I think it's better for individual sports. Or, in the words of a Sunday footballer we spoke to before the ride, stoned and in tune with the team, I'm shit hot. Stoned and out of tune with the team, I'm just shit. Our research illustrated that cannabis use is widespread through many amateur sports, from tennis to running, weightlifting to swimming. Common responses to the question why included the relief of boredom from the swimmer, the effects of listening to the body more, the weightlifter, and aiding the process of getting into the zone, often referred to as the matrix effect. Yet the emphasis was predominantly on pleasure rather than performance. While an ice skater told us with a cheeky wink, there are no police on the ice, a cricketer gave a shrug and said, cannabis is a perfect fit for a sport that involves summer, a length of time, and an afternoon break for tea. The possibility that cannabis might be considered to contribute towards better health, enhance sporting performance, or follow the code of the spirit of sport subverts dominant political reasoning in support of regulation or prohibition. So what is current scholarly thinking on cannabis and sport? And how has it impacted on WADA? In the contest to realign cannabis use as an anathema to sport, and thereby to a healthy and ethical society, scholars have gone to great lengths to show that cannabis fulfills all 3 WADA criteria for the prohibition list.
The most recent major study of cannabis in sport was led by a WADA consultant, Marion Huestis, in 2011 for the journal Sports Medicine. It provides much literature indicating that cannabis has the potential to be detrimental to the health. But in order to support the inclusion of cannabis on the WADA prohibited list, the authors needed to also show that it either enhanced performance or violated the spirit of sport, so as to fulfill 2 out of the 3 criteria. On both counts, they found the available literature inconclusive, but that did not prevent them from reaching their conclusions. There are two significant problems with the argument in the report. Firstly, many of the potential health risks contradict evidence on the potential enhancement of performance. The problem here is not the existence of contradictory evidence, but rather how the authors use the evidence. For example, cannabis use is deemed detrimental to decision making in order to support arguments regarding health problems. However, one page later, the report suggests it doesn't affect decision making in order to support the author's argument on performance enhancement. Secondly, the argument on cannabis use violating the spirit of sport is dogmatic and tautological, stating that because cannabis is prohibited, it is therefore against the spirit of sport and therefore should be prohibited. The only evidence they provide for this argument is the loss of a sponsorship deal for an athlete caught smoking cannabis.
Something happens as we descend from the mountains to the plains. As we follow the cyclists in the support vehicle as it rolls into the Valencia suburbs, for the first time in 3 days, the riders have decided to ride as a pack. The finish line in their sights, they are united, a swathe of racing yellow. It's only when you get up close and see the patchwork of sponsors' names on the jerseys and cannabis and medical bike tour emblazoned across the chest that you remember the cause. The bike tour's aim is to raise €50,000 for medical research into the use of cannabis as a cure for cancer. The finish has been chosen to coincide with the opening of GrowMed, Europe's largest medical cannabis trade show. Most of the money is to go towards research being conducted by Drs. Guzman and Velasco at Madrid Complutense University, involving the combination of cannabis oil with anti-cancer agents. It is at GrowMed where the business of cannabis comes into play, and almost all of our group transformed from amateur cyclists into trade professionals. The expo is just like any other trade show, except it revolves around the legalised cannabis industry. The glitzy standard fertiliser companies operating on huge margins, companies selling everything from quality seed strains to the latest grow equipment and consumer accessories. What is evident in some of the expos is the emphasis on the medical, in the imagery, promotional material, the designated medical arena hosting a forum of experts dispensing medical as well as legal advice. A Dutch member of the ride who runs an award-winning seed bank realises that medical cannabis is a form of sustainability, as witnessed by the American model of legitimisation. However, the potential medical benefits of the plant also give him a cause, a means of self-worth. I've done very well out of cannabis, he says, but I want to give something back. I know a lot about a plant that can treat cancer. Do you understand what that means? If I don't do something with that knowledge, then what sort of person am I? Another of the cyclists, a key figure in the Dutch cannabis industry and a GrowMed director, said, "You've got to give something back to society. If you don't, they will get you. In Holland, they are trying to close us down. That's why medical cannabis is important. At the expo, there is a separate area for it. Doctors and scientists are paid to come to talk to the public who have medical needs but might not want to interact with the more crazy stuff that happens here."
The ride's Dutch contingent have been in the legal cannabis business for over 30 years. They are critical of the Dutch legislative model, explaining that it has encouraged organised crime that in turn has brought pressure to close them down. The multifarious, idiosyncratic legislative frameworks regarding cannabis within different member states of the European Union is a continual factor on the cannabis trade show circuit. Each of these expos has to adjust to these differences as they tour Europe. And being from the UK, we began to realise that our understandings of cannabis were particularly culturally situated. With a greater debate about legislation in Holland, these traders perceive a trend against cannabis businesses in Europe. In Europe, the medical aspect of cannabis is seen as a sustainable business model. Unlike the recreational sector, there are greater opportunities for legitimisation. Yet the transition is problematic. To what extent are the medical and the recreational sectors in conflict with each other? Will there become a point where there's an it's unsustainable to market seeds called atomical haze as a medical product? How will the sector manage the transition? And how much of the debate about cannabis will be decided and led by the businesses most affected by the legitimisation of cannabis? Moreover, in the struggle for legitimisation of medical product, the homegrower base which we encountered is at odds with the pharmaceutical sector seeking patents and licenses from government institutions for their own sustainable production. A key component underlying the struggle to legitimise cannabis is whether it is detrimental or beneficial for health. As the bike ride challenged hegemonic views of healthy sport, it further challenged the image of health around cannabis use. The bike ride is an embryonic movement that strives for legitimisation as a charity ride for medical research. Moreover, through finding legitimisation by participating in sport, the ride additionally confronts the production of a politicised and commoditised discourse of sport, aligned to particular ideas of healthy bodies and healthy society. By offering an alternative avenue of wholesome sport, the use of cannabis as a tool to engage with and enhance the ethical and societal values of that spirit of sport, so well defined by the World Anti-Doping Authority of health, fun, joy, courage, dedication, teamwork, community and solidarity. The bike tour provided qualitative evidence that cannabis had brought a group of people together to take part in a healthy activity that contributed to the greater welfare of society by raising money for a respected cancer research program. Their ride confronted a dominant discourse about how cannabis is detrimental to the social and physical health. Such prejudice and discrimination that produces a dirty and dangerous object that stains those associated with it is not just isolated to WADA. It goes into scientific institutions, and once again, the bike ride brings their practices into sharp relief, best illustrated by the following example. Just 0.17% of the £3,505,100,000 funded by the Medical Research Council Wellcome since 2004 has contributed towards knowledge on therapeutic uses of cannabis. The contribution towards funding research into medical uses of cannabis that was raised by a bunch of stoned cyclists over 3 days in Spain equates to just over 5% of the contribution made by MRC Wellcome in the last decade.
Finally, something else became evident from our study of bike talk. Rather than sitting around smoking cannabis and talking about change, activism is most effective when, through practice, you collectively dispel the myths and stereotypes that have surrounded the drug and its users for half a century. And the journey towards that change may just begin by getting on your bike.
And now, a short film, and then the quiz.